When I walked into the courtroom, my daughter rolled her eyes and whispered about me like I was nothing. But then the judge looked up, went pale, and whispered in shock, "It's her." The entire room froze. No one knew who I really was, not even my own daughter. But that trial, it changed everything. My name is Evelyn Carter, and at 69 years old, I thought I had already fought all the big battles life had in store for me. I was wrong. That morning, when I walked into the courthouse, my daughter looked at me like I was an inconvenience, like I was just a shadow in her way. Marissa, my only child, leaned toward her husband, Calvin, and whispered something that made them both smirk. But the judge's eyes froze the moment he saw me. His lips parted and he whispered, "It's her." The room hushed. People stared. And for the first time in years, I realized they had no idea who I really was. But to explain how we got there, I have to take you back to the moment everything started unraveling. Back to my home, the house that raised us all. After my husband Leon passed 3 years ago, I tried to hold on to routines. Every morning, I brewed my coffee in the chipped blue mug I'd had since our wedding day. I watered the African violets he loved so much and sat by the kitchen window, letting the soft light fall over the embroidered curtains. It wasn't a glamorous life. I had cleaned offices at night, sold sweet potato pies at church fundraisers, even hemmed clothes for neighbors to make ends meet. But it was a life built with dignity, sweat, and sacrifice. And every sacrifice had been for Marissa. My baby. My pride. My reason. When she married Calvin, a man with a sharp tongue and a sharper suit, I kept my doubts to myself. Leon had warned me before he died. That boy's got ambition that runs colder than ice. Be careful. But love makes blind believers, and Marissa loved him. So I swallowed my pride, set my Sunday table, and kept smiling. It was a gray October Thursday when the ground shifted under me. I had cooked chicken and dumplings, the dish Marissa always asked for when she was a girl. The house smelled of simmering broth, thyme, and a hint of butter biscuits I had baked from scratch. I laid out the lace tablecloth I embroidered during her high school years. Fresh chrysanthemums sat in a vase at the center. When the door opened, I braced for warmth. Instead, Calvin strolled in without a word, dropping into Leon's armchair and flicking on the TV. Marissa followed in a green dress I had bought her long ago, but her eyes were cold as January ice. "Mom, we need to talk," she said. Her tone wasn't daughterly. It was businesslike, clipped, and impatient. I set down the serving spoon, wiping my hands on my apron. "What is it, baby?" Calvin didn't look away from the TV, but I felt his smirk. "This house is too much for you," Marissa said. "You can't keep it up alone. Calvin and I need a bigger place before we start our family. We've found the perfect retirement community for you. Safe. Friendly. They even have bingo nights." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My knees went weak. "Marissa, this is our home. Your father and I built this life here. Every memory you have lives inside these walls." She crossed her arms. "Memories live in your heart, not in bricks. This house makes sense for us now." Calvin finally spoke, his voice smooth and slick as oil. "It's for the best, Mrs. Carter. We'll handle the paperwork. You don't have to worry." Worry. My chest burned. This man had walked into my living room, sat in my husband's chair, and now spoke as though he owned everything Leon and I had built. "I need time," I whispered. "There's nothing to think about," Marissa replied coldly. "The appraiser comes next week." And with that, they walked out, leaving my dumplings untouched, the flowers wilting, and my heart cracking wide open. Would you forgive your own child if she did this to you? Stay with me, because it only gets harder from here. The following week was a nightmare. Calvin returned with an appraiser in a gray suit. They strolled through my home, talking about dated tiles and outdated wiring, as though Leon's handiwork was worthless. Marissa nodded along, avoiding my eyes. A few days later, they arrived with a lawyer carrying a briefcase full of papers. "Mrs. Carter, we just need your signature to transfer the property," he said. "Transfer?" I asked, confused. "Yes, to keep it in the family. Marissa and Calvin will take title." My breath caught. This wasn't about selling. They wanted to take. "I'm not signing," I said firmly. Calvin's mask slipped. His eyes hardened. "Ma'am, you're no longer in a condition to make these decisions. Marissa is your only heir." She's acting in your best interest. You lie, I snapped. This is my house. Mom, don't make this harder, Marissa murmured, finally showing a hint of guilt. Remember last week when you almost left the gas on? I froze. A lie. I had never forgotten the gas. Calvin smirked, satisfied. The lawyer cleared his throat. If you refuse, we may have to pursue a declaration of incapacity. That word, incapacity, echoed in my ears like a death knell. When they left, I collapsed into Leon's chair, sobbing until the cushions were soaked. I felt betrayed, humiliated, invisible. Have you ever felt erased in your own home? Keep listening, because what they didn't know is that Leon had left me a secret. Marissa returned alone a few days later, carrying cardboard boxes. Mom, I came to help you pack. Her voice was flat, robotic. Marissa, please. This is my home. That's exactly why I'm doing this, for your safety. She began shoving photographs into boxes. Books, dishes, even the funeral dress I had worn to bury Leon, stuffed like garbage into donation bags. Then she found my jewelry box. Inside were my wedding ring, Leon's anniversary earrings, and my mother's gold chain. These will be safer in a deposit box, she said, slipping them into her purse. Those are mine. I cried, grabbing for it. Mom, your anger proves you can't take care of yourself. The chill in her voice broke something inside me. That day, my daughter stopped being the little girl who once called me her hero. When she left, taking my treasures with her, I sat surrounded by half-empty boxes. My life was being stripped piece by piece, and there was nothing I could do. Or so I thought. Leon's secret. Late that night, as I sorted through Leon's desk, I stumbled on an old book with a key tucked inside. It opened a folder marked with his initials. Inside, I found documents that made my hands tremble. Property deeds, more than one. Bank statements with numbers I could hardly comprehend. Shares in companies, including the very place where Calvin worked. And a last will and testament, signed 6 months before Leon passed. The will named me as sole heir to everything. Marissa would inherit only if she cared for me with love and respect. At the bottom, a handwritten letter in Leon's careful script. My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. Forgive me for the secrecy, but I wanted to surprise you in your golden years. I never trusted Calvin. If Marissa treats you with love, she will share in our fortune. If she mistreats you, then you hold all the power to protect yourself. Use it wisely, not to hurt but to teach. I pressed the letter to my chest. Tears blurred my vision, but for the first time in months, they weren't tears of defeat. Leon had seen the storm coming. He had built me an ark. I sat in my living room surrounded by papers worth more than anything I'd ever dreamed. Outside, rain began to fall softly against the windows. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of power stir inside me. Marissa and Calvin thought they were taking everything. They had no idea this house was the least valuable thing I owned. And when the movers came on Monday, they were about to find out the truth. When Monday morning came, the clouds were heavy, like the sky itself was holding its breath. I sat in Leon's old armchair with my chipped blue mug, sipping tea as if it were any other day. But inside, my nerves were thrumming like a drum. The sound of tires crunching gravel outside told me the moment had come. The door opened without a knock. Calvin walked in first, bold as brass, followed by Marissa. Behind them, 2 movers in navy uniforms carried empty boxes. Mom, what are you doing? Marissa asked, her voice sharp. You're not ready. I set my mug down carefully. Because I'm not going anywhere. Calvin's smirk widened. We've discussed this, Mrs. Carter. You don't have a choice. These gentlemen are here to help you. The movers glanced between us nervously. They were just doing a job, but even they could feel the tension. No boxes, I said firmly. Not one thing leaves this house today. Marissa's arms folded, her foot tapping. Mom, stop embarrassing yourself. I rose slowly from the chair, my knees aching but my back straight. The only people embarrassed today should be you two. I walked to Leon's desk, where I had neatly stacked a few documents. Not all, just enough. I picked up a deed, its seal still crisp, and held it up. Did you know, I asked calmly, that the apartment you've been living in for the last 3 years doesn't belong to you, or even your landlord? Marissa frowned. What are you talking about? We pay rent every month. Yes, to a management company. And do you know where that money goes? Straight into my account. Because Marissa, Calvin, I own your entire building. The room fell silent. The movers froze in the hallway, their boxes dangling uselessly at their sides. That's impossible, Calvin barked, stepping closer. You live on a pension. I smiled faintly. I lived on a pension because I chose to. Your father-in-law was a wise man. Smarter than either of you ever gave him credit for. I laid the deed on the table in front of them. Marissa's hands trembled as she picked it up, scanning the black and white proof of everything I said. This can't be real. Oh, it's very real. And that's just the beginning. Calvin snatched the paper from her hands, his face pale. You forged this. That's what this is. Fake documents. Lies. You can verify them anytime, I said. I encourage you to. Marissa's eyes filled with tears. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know until last week. Leon left it hidden to protect me. He knew what kind of man you married. Calvin slammed his hand on the table, making the papers jump. This doesn't change anything. We're still moving you out today. On the contrary, I replied, my voice steel. It changes everything. Because I no longer need to beg for dignity in my own home. I have the means and the will to protect myself. The movers shifted uneasily. One cleared his throat. Ma'am, do you want us to? You can leave, I said, still staring at Calvin. Nothing is being moved here today. They didn't wait for a second invitation. They carried their boxes back out to the truck, murmuring to each other as they left. When the door shut, Marissa sank onto the couch, her face pale. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't understand. Calvin said. Don't. I cut her off, my heart aching even through my anger. Don't tell me you didn't know you were betraying me. You knew. You just chose to believe him over your own mother. Her tears spilled over. I thought it was for your own good. I thought you'd be safer. Safer? My voice shook. You wanted to strip me of my home. You wanted to pack up Leon's chair, my memories, even my jewelry. Tell me, Marissa, did that feel like love to you? Her sobs filled the room, but I held my ground. Calvin's face twisted with anger. Listen here, old woman, he spat. You may have papers, but I have the law on my side. You're senile. Unfit. We'll get you declared incompetent, and then Marissa will have everything anyway. I straightened to my full height. Try me. But remember, your landlord is standing in front of you. And your employer? Let's just say I now own enough stock to influence who stays and who goes. How long do you think your company will tolerate you once I start making calls? His bravado faltered, if only for a second. You wouldn't dare. Wouldn't I? I asked softly. After all you've done to me? Marissa clutched her stomach suddenly, her hands trembling. Her voice broke as she cried, Mom, please stop. I can't do this. I'm pregnant. The room went still. Pregnant. My knees nearly buckled. After months of coldness, betrayal, lies, this was how I found out? Is it true? I whispered. She nodded, tears streaming. I wanted to tell you differently. I wanted it to be special. But Calvin said, don't say his name right now. My heart was a storm. I was about to be a grandmother, and the news had been weaponized against me. Calvin stepped forward, grasping at straws. See, you can't evict us. You can't destroy your grandchild's home before it's even born. I closed my eyes, hearing Leon's words in my mind. Use the power not to hurt, but to teach. When I opened them, my decision was clear. You have 30 days, I said firmly. Marissa's head snapped up. What? 30 days to find somewhere else to live. That's the law, and I'll honor it. But after that, you're out of my building. If you want my forgiveness, you'll start by respecting my boundaries. Calvin laughed bitterly. You think you've won, old woman. But this isn't over. I'll fight you. I'll fight for custody of my child. I'll fight until you have nothing. I met his glare without blinking. Fight all you want. But understand this. The world is different now. You don't hold the cards. I do. Marissa sobbed quietly on the couch, caught between loyalty to her husband and the bond she had tried to sever with me. Calvin stormed toward the door, his fists clenched. This isn't the end, he growled. I'll see you in court. And as the door slammed, I knew he meant it. What would you do if your own son-in-law swore to destroy you in court, and your pregnant daughter was caught in the middle? In part 3, Calvin comes back with threats, the law on his side, and a plan to erase me for good. After Calvin slammed the door, silence wrapped around the house like a heavy quilt. Marissa sat on the couch, her face streaked with tears, hands on her stomach as if to shield the life growing inside her. I stood by Leon's desk, the will and deeds spread like armor across the wood. But my chest ached. My daughter was still my daughter. And now she was carrying a child who didn't ask to be born into this storm. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered through the house, touching the walls Leon had painted, the photo frames we had hung, the grooves in the hardwood from Marissa's first steps. Everywhere I turned, memories reminded me what I was fighting for. Not just the bricks and mortar, but the dignity of a lifetime of sacrifice. At dawn, I brewed my coffee in the chipped mug and whispered to Leon's empty chair. I found your secret, love. And I'll use it just like you wanted. Not to hurt, to teach. Would you let them back in your life after this kind of betrayal? Or close the door for good? Stay with me, because the test came sooner than I imagined. 2 weeks passed in uneasy quiet. Marissa stayed away. Calvin, however, was biding his time. One humid afternoon, the building manager buzzed my phone. Mrs. Carter, there's a man downstairs. He says he has a right to come up. He's causing a scene. My stomach nodded. What man? Calvin Foster. Marissa's husband. My tormentor. I slipped on my sweater and took Leon's letter from the desk, folding it into my pocket like a shield. The lobby was buzzing when I arrived. Calvin was red-faced, pacing in front of the desk, shouting at poor Mr. Douglas, the manager. That old woman has my wife locked up. Call the police. This is kidnapping. Mr. Douglas looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Good afternoon, Calvin, I said evenly. His head snapped toward me, his eyes bloodshot. You give me back Marissa right now. She is exactly where she wants to be, I replied. And if you don't leave my property immediately, I'll be the one calling the police. This isn't your property, he barked. You're a liar. I pulled out my phone, dialing my attorney on speaker. Victoria? It's Evelyn. Could you confirm something for Mr. Foster here? Her voice came clear and confident. Mrs. Carter is the sole owner of the building at 143 Oakwood Street. All legal filings are in her name. She has full authority over the premises. The manager's eyes widened in surprise. Calvin's face drained of color. Anything else you need clarified? I asked sweetly. Calvin muttered, this isn't over. But the fury in his voice didn't match the fear in his eyes. He stormed out, shoving the door so hard the glass rattled. Later that evening, Marissa showed up at my door alone. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen. Mom, I need to talk. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She sank into the armchair that had once been Leon's, clasping her hands. Calvin said if I didn't convince you to move, he'd leave me. He told me you were dangerous, that you were forgetting things. I let him twist everything. And I believed him. Her voice broke. I've been so blind. I studied her carefully. And now, I don't know what to do. He controls everything. The money, the bills, even my phone. He said if I leave him, I'll have nothing. I sat across from her, my hands folded. You'll have me. But Marissa, understand this. I will never let him treat me like trash again. And I won't let him treat you that way either. But you have to choose where you stand. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I want to be better. I want my baby to grow up different. For the first time in months, I saw a flicker of the daughter I had raised. In the days that followed, Marissa stayed in her old room. She washed her dishes without being asked. She folded laundry. She even brought me tea one morning, whispering, I want to try, Mom. But trust wasn't rebuilt in a week. Every time I looked at her, I remembered the boxes, the jewelry, the betrayal. Still, Leon's words rang in my mind, not to hurt, but to teach. I decided to give her a chance. Not my forgiveness, not yet, but a chance. 2 months later, the call came. Marissa had gone pale as she listened. It's Calvin, she whispered. He's suing us. He wants full custody of the baby. He says you manipulated me, turned me against him. He's accusing you of alienation. My stomach clenched. When's the hearing? Next month. I nodded slowly. Then we prepare. That night, as I packed the evidence, texts Calvin had sent, recordings of his threats, the deed to their apartment, I felt the weight of what was coming. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about a child. My grandchild. And I knew Calvin would use every dirty trick to try to take everything from us. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and paper, the kind of scent that clung to rooms where lives were decided. I walked through the doors with my head high, but my heart was pounding against my ribs like a drum. Beside me, Marissa clutched her belly. She was showing now, her pregnancy a visible reminder of what was at stake. My grandchild. Our future. Across the room, Calvin sat with a sleek young lawyer in an expensive suit. His smirk was back, smug and sharp. He looked at me as if he'd already won. When the proceedings began, Calvin's lawyer stood and painted a portrait of me so twisted I barely recognized myself. Your Honor, Mrs. Carter is a bitter woman. Unable to let go of control, she manipulated her daughter into abandoning her husband. She used wealth, hidden secret wealth, to control every move. She has alienated Mr. Foster from his child before the child is even born. I wanted to leap to my feet to shout lies, but Victoria, my attorney, placed a calming hand on mine. Patience, she whispered. Calvin nodded solemnly at the judge, his voice dripping false sincerity. All I want is to protect my child from this toxicity. To raise them in a stable, loving home. Stable. Loving. My stomach churned at the hypocrisy. Then it was our turn. Victoria rose, composed and confident. Your Honor, the truth is simpler than the fiction you've just heard. Mrs. Carter has been subjected to months of harassment, coercion, and threats, all orchestrated by Mr. Foster. She laid out the evidence one by one. Text messages where Calvin insulted Marissa, calling her weak, stupid, ungrateful. Recordings Marissa had secretly captured. Calvin threatening to leave her if she didn't throw me into a retirement home. Neighbor statements describing Calvin's shouting matches that shook the walls. Finally, Victoria placed Leon's will on the table. And let us not forget, the late Mr. Carter foresaw the possibility of this very abuse. He structured his estate to protect his wife if she were ever mistreated. Mr. Foster's plan was not only cruel, it was futile. The courtroom murmured. Then the judge looked up from the papers. Mrs. Carter? He said, his voice hesitant. Yes, Your Honor, I replied. He removed his glasses, staring hard at me. Do you remember me? A ripple of confusion spread through the room. I squinted, studying the lines of his face. Behind the gray hair and stern expression, I saw it. The boyish features of a young intern from decades ago. David, I whispered. The judge smiled faintly. Judge David Morales now. But back then, I was just the kid you taught to file case briefs and not lose faith when senior lawyers mocked me. You told me once I'd be a great judge. Gasps filled the courtroom. Calvin's lawyer stiffened, whispering furiously. Your Honor, Calvin's lawyer interjected quickly. This constitutes a conflict of interest. Surely you must recuse yourself. Judge Morales raised a hand. I will review the request, but let me be clear. Justice will be served. And Mrs. Carter, for what it's worth. I never forgot your kindness. Calvin's face drained of color. He leaned toward his lawyer, hissing. Fix this. Fix it. But no amount of fixing could change what was coming. When it was Marissa's turn, she rose shakily, her voice soft but steady. I believed my husband when he said my mother was losing her mind. I believed him when he said putting her away was love. But it wasn't love. It was control. He made me turn against the woman who raised me, who sacrificed everything for me. And I regret it more than anything in my life. Her tears fell freely. I want my child to know their grandmother. I want them to learn from her strength, not from his cruelty. The room was silent except for the sound of her sobbing. Even I had to steady myself to keep from breaking. Judge Morales cleared his throat, his expression firm. Having reviewed the evidence, this court finds that Mr. Foster engaged in manipulative, abusive behavior. His petition for custody is denied. Furthermore, a protective order will be issued preventing him from harassing Mrs. Carter or her daughter. Legal costs will be his responsibility. The gavel fell with a sharp crack. It was over. Calvin's face twisted with rage. He slammed his fists against the table. This isn't justice. This is revenge. But no one listened. The bailiff stepped forward, ushering him away as he shouted threats into the echoing chamber. Marissa collapsed into my arms, sobbing. Mom, thank you. Thank you for fighting when I couldn't. I stroked her hair gently. It's not just for you, baby. It's for your child. For our future. As we walked out of the courthouse, the sky was clear for the first time in weeks. Sunlight spilled across the steps, and for the first time since Leon's death, I felt like the world was opening a door instead of closing one. The day after the trial, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could breathe again. The courthouse had declared the truth. Calvin had lost. Marissa and I walked out into the sunlight like survivors of a storm. But storms don't end just because a judge lowers a gavel. Some thunder rolls on, waiting for the right moment to strike again. It started with phone calls. At first, I ignored the unknown numbers, but one evening I picked up. "You think you've won?" Calvin's voice hissed down the line. "This is only round one. I'll destroy both of you." Then came the letters, stuffed into my mailbox in the dead of night. Slurs scribbled across scraps of paper. Thief. Manipulator. Witch. Marissa found me tearing one into pieces at the kitchen counter. "Mom, you can't let him get in your head." But he already was. Every ring of the phone made me jump. Every shadow outside my window made my heart race. What would you do if the man who already lost still vowed to take everything from you? Because Calvin wasn't finished, not by a long shot. Meanwhile, Marissa was trying to make amends. She stayed with me, cooking dinner some nights, folding laundry, even helping me tend Leon's violets on the windowsill. But guilt clung to her like a second skin. One evening, she sat across from me at the table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "Mom, do you think you'll ever forgive me?" she whispered. I studied her face. She looked so young, so fragile. Yet she was carrying life inside her. "I don't know, baby," I said honestly. "Trust isn't a light switch. It takes time. But I see you trying. And that means something." She nodded, tears brimming. "I just don't want my baby to grow up thinking I ruined everything." I reached across the table, taking her hand. "Your child will know the truth, that you found your way back. That matters more than the mistakes." Calvin didn't fade quietly. Neighbors whispered that he lurked near the building at night. The manager, Mr. Douglas, told me he tried to slip in through the lobby twice, shouting that he had rights. Finally, one humid afternoon, he showed up again, pounding on the door of my apartment. I opened it just enough to see his face, wild-eyed and desperate. "Marissa," he shouted over my shoulder. "Come home. This old woman's poisoned you against me." Marissa appeared at my side, her voice shaking. "Calvin, stop. I'm not coming back." His gaze flicked between us, dark with rage. "Then you'll regret this. Both of you." I shut the door firmly, sliding the bolt. My hands were trembling, but my voice was steady. "He's lost control. That makes him dangerous." Amid the fear, something unexpected began to grow. Marissa started attending counseling sessions offered at church. She opened up about Calvin's control, how he isolated her from friends, tracked her spending, even mocked her dreams. One night, she confessed, "He told me quitting my job was proof I loved him. I thought I was being a good wife. But really, I was just giving up pieces of myself." I listened, my chest aching. My daughter had been trapped long before I saw the signs. "Then it's time you start taking those pieces back," I said. Slowly, she did. She applied for part-time work at a small accounting firm. She joined a support group for women recovering from toxic relationships. And she smiled again, not often, not fully, but enough to remind me of the little girl who used to chase butterflies in our yard. As for me, Leon's letter haunted my thoughts. Use the power not to hurt, but to teach. I had more than money now. I had leverage, security, and, most importantly, perspective. I'd been stripped bare by betrayal, but instead of breaking me, it had revealed a new purpose. I began speaking to women at church, sharing bits of my story. At first, I kept the details vague. But when one older woman whispered, "My son's trying to take my house too," I knew my silence was useless. I told her everything. Her tears were a mirror of my own months before. That's when the idea sparked. Maybe I could build something bigger than my own defense. A refuge. A place where women like me, women discarded, manipulated, or forgotten, could find strength again. But Calvin wasn't done. One night, as Marissa and I prepared dinner, the phone rang again. This time, Victoria's name flashed on the screen. "Evelyn, I just got word," she said. "Calvin filed an appeal. He's claiming judicial bias. He's not letting this go." My knees weakened, but I steadied myself against the counter. "Then we fight again," I said. Marissa's hand found mine. "We'll fight together." For the first time, her voice carried strength instead of fear. That night, as I tucked Leon's letter back into its folder, I whispered into the quiet house. "I hear you, love. Not to hurt, but to teach. I'll make sure of it." Outside, thunder rolled. The storm wasn't over, but I was no longer afraid of the rain. What would you do if the man who tried to steal your life came back with the law on his side? In part of my story, Calvin's appeal drags us back into court, and the fight for dignity becomes the fight of my life. The summons arrived on a Tuesday morning. A cream-colored envelope slid through my door with heavy lettering on the front. Notice of appeal. I sat at the kitchen table with my chipped blue mug, staring at the words until they blurred. Calvin wasn't finished. He was dragging us back into court, claiming bias because Judge Morales had once known me. I felt the old fear rising, but Leon's voice echoed in my memory. Not to hurt, but to teach. I straightened my back. If Calvin wanted another fight, he'd get one. But this time, I wasn't just defending myself. I was building something bigger. The courtroom was colder this time. Calvin sat tall, his lawyer whispering confidently. He thought this was his chance. The new judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes, opened the hearing. We will review claims of bias in the previous trial and reconsider evidence as necessary. Calvin's lawyer launched into his argument. Your Honor, Judge Morales had a personal connection to Mrs. Carter, compromising his ability to rule fairly. We demand the verdict be overturned. I sat still, hands folded in my lap, heart steady. Victoria stood. Your Honor, the relationship in question was limited to a decades-old professional acquaintance. Judge Morales' record shows impartiality in every ruling. Furthermore, the evidence against Mr. Foster remains unchanged and damning. She displayed the texts, the recordings, the neighbor testimonies again. The truth was still the truth, no matter how many times Calvin tried to twist it. But Calvin couldn't contain himself. She's manipulating all of you, he shouted, leaping to his feet. This old woman has poisoned my wife, stolen my home, and now she's stealing my child. The judge's gavel cracked. Mr. Foster, control yourself or I'll have you removed. His face turned red, veins straining at his neck. This is a conspiracy. You'll see, I'll take everything from her. The courtroom buzzed. Even his own lawyer looked rattled. The judge's voice was ice. Threats in this courtroom will not be tolerated. Based on the evidence, the appeal is denied. The original verdict stands. Another gavel strike. Another victory. But Calvin's glare as he was escorted out promised one thing. He wouldn't stop. What would you do if the man who lost twice still swore he'd come for you? Stay with me, because I realized I couldn't just fight for myself anymore. I had to fight for others too. After the hearing, women in the courthouse approached me. Mrs. Carter, one whispered, I'm going through something like you. My son is trying to sell my house without my permission. Another leaned close. My niece wants to put me in a home so she can take my pension. Their eyes were full of the same fear I had once felt. That night, I lay awake, Leon's letter under my pillow. His words weren't just for me, they were for all of us. Women forgotten, dismissed, or betrayed by the people we loved most. By dawn, the decision was clear. I would create a refuge, a foundation, a place where women like us could reclaim our dignity. I started small. I gathered Marissa, Pastor Ruth from church, and 2 neighbors who had always stood by me. We sat in my living room, surrounded by stacks of Leon's documents and the aroma of my sweet potato pies. I want to build something, I said. A house for women like us. A place where betrayal doesn't mean the end. Where we can teach each other to rise again. Pastor Ruth nodded, tears in her eyes. Call it what it is, Evelyn. A home. A home for dignity. And just like that, home and dignity was born. Meanwhile, Marissa was changing before my eyes. She went to her support group faithfully. She started her job at the accounting firm, coming home tired but proud. She even laughed again, real laughter, the kind that made her eyes shine like when she was a little girl. One evening, as we cooked dinner together, she touched her belly and said, Mom, I want my child to grow up knowing this story. Not the pain, but the strength. I smiled softly. Then let's make sure the ending is worth telling. But Calvin didn't vanish. Rumors swirled. He'd lost his job after word spread about his courtroom outburst. He'd been seen drinking heavily at a bar on the edge of town. One night, Marissa's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You can't hide behind her forever. She showed it to me, her hands trembling. I placed my hand over hers. Let him send all the words he wants. We'll answer with actions. Weeks later, we signed the paperwork to purchase a small, rundown house on the edge of town. It needed repairs, paint, and more love than walls could hold. But it was ours. The first house of home and dignity. As I walked through the creaky halls, Leon's words whispered through my mind again. Not to hurt, but to teach. I whispered back, We're teaching now, love. We're teaching. But just as the future seemed to open wide, Calvin appeared again. Marissa and I were leaving the new house one afternoon when a car screeched to a halt across the street. Calvin stepped out, his face gaunt, his eyes burning. You think you're free of me? He shouted. This isn't over. Marissa clutched my arm. My heart pounded, but I stood tall, meeting his glare. Because this time, I wasn't just a woman defending her home. I was the founder of something bigger. And I wasn't afraid anymore. Calvin's car idled across the street like a predator stalking prey. His face was gaunt now, his eyes red-rimmed, but his voice was as venomous as ever. "You think you're free of me?" he shouted. "This isn't over." Marissa tightened her grip on my arm, her body trembling. But I kept my shoulders square. Fear had once ruled me, but not anymore. Over the next weeks, Calvin's presence grew more threatening. We'd see his car parked near the grocery store when we shopped. At night, shadows lingered at the end of our block. Once, as I watered Leon's violets, I caught sight of him in the alley across the street, watching. I called Victoria, my attorney. "Isn't there anything more we can do?" She sighed. "The protective order is clear, Evelyn, but until he violates it directly, sets foot on your property, threatens you face to face, we're limited." It was maddening. Calvin hovered just outside the boundaries, poisoning the air without stepping into the trap. What would you do if danger circled your home but the law said, "Not yet"? Because that was my life, waiting for him to cross the line. The line came closer one humid evening. Marissa and I returned from church, her belly now round with 7 months of life. As I fumbled with the keys, I felt it, a presence behind us. "Going somewhere, ladies?" Calvin's voice hissed. We spun. He was there, half hidden in the shadows by the stairwell. His smile was twisted, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. My heart thundered, but I forced calm. "You're in violation, Calvin. Leave now." He stepped closer. "Or what? You'll call your judge friend again? He won't save you this time." Marissa's voice broke. "Calvin, please. Stop this. Think of the baby." Something flickered in his expression, guilt, maybe, or longing, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "That child is mine," he spat. "And I won't let her raise it to hate me." My phone was already in my hand. "Leave," I said firmly, hitting record. For a moment, I thought he might lunge. But the sight of the glowing red record button made him freeze. He sneered, then backed away. "This isn't finished." The echo of his footsteps trailed off into the night, leaving us shaking on the steps. That close call could have broken us. But instead, it lit a fire. The very next morning, I poured my energy into home and dignity. The house we had purchased needed everything: new paint, new wiring, new hope. Volunteers from church came with tools and casseroles. Neighbors brought old furniture. Marissa, despite her pregnancy, spent hours painting a nursery blue room that would soon hold beds for women starting over. One afternoon, as I watched her humming softly, brush strokes steady, I thought, she's learning. We're both learning. The day the first residents arrived, I cried. There was Mrs. Lawson, a 70-year-old widow whose own son had tried to sell her home while she was in the hospital. And there was Anita, a woman in her 50s who had been kicked out of her daughter's house after raising her grandchildren. They walked into home and dignity carrying nothing but worn bags and weary eyes. "Welcome home," I said, hugging each one. "This is your place now. A place where no one decides your worth but you." Their tears matched mine. Meanwhile, Marissa continued her own journey. She spoke openly in support groups about her mistakes. "I believed a man who convinced me to turn against my mother. I thought obedience was love. But love without respect is just control." One night, she confessed to me, "Mom, sometimes I feel like I don't deserve your forgiveness." I touched her hand gently. "Forgiveness isn't a gift you deserve. It's a gift I choose to give. And I'm working on choosing it." She smiled faintly. "Then I'll keep working too." But Calvin was unraveling. Reports trickled back. He had been fired from his job, evicted from his apartment. He was seen drinking heavily, muttering about betrayal. And then came the letter, slipped under our door one morning in messy handwriting. "If I can't have her, no one will." The words chilled my blood. Victoria urged us to go to the police. With the recording from the stairwell and the letter, they finally had enough to act. A restraining order became an arrest warrant. The day of his hearing, I stood across the courtroom from Calvin again. But this time, his arrogance was gone. His shoulders slumped, his face hollow. The judge read the charges: violation of protective order, harassment, threats. Calvin glanced at Marissa, his eyes softening. For the first time, his voice cracked. "I just didn't want to lose you." Marissa held her belly, tears brimming. "You lost me the moment you made me choose between you and my mother." He bowed his head. The gavel struck. He was sentenced to probation and mandatory counseling. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt lighter, not because Calvin was punished, but because we weren't alone anymore. Home and dignity was growing. The women there leaned on each other, shared meals, prayed together. And in their faces, I saw myself, months earlier, broken and afraid. Now I was something else. A teacher. A protector. A survivor. Have you ever turned your deepest wound into someone else's lifeline? That's what I was doing, and it gave me more strength than I ever imagined. But even as peace began to settle, life had one more twist waiting. Marissa went into labor early, 2 weeks before her due date. As I rushed her to the hospital, my hands gripping the wheel, I whispered, "Hold on, baby. Both of you hold on." Because the next battle wasn't with Calvin, or with lawyers, or with betrayal. It was with time itself. What would you do if your daughter went into labor while your family was still healing from betrayal? In part of this story, the baby arrives, and with her, the chance for true redemption. The night Marissa went into labor, thunder rolled low in the distance, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. We were sitting in the living room when she gasped suddenly, clutching her stomach. "Mom, it's time." Her face was pale, her hands trembling. She wasn't due for 2 more weeks, but life has a way of arriving on its own schedule. I grabbed my keys, my heart pounding. "Hold on, baby. We're getting you to the hospital." The drive was a blur of stoplights and whispered prayers. Rain began to fall, streaking the windshield. Marissa gripped my hand with a strength I didn't know she still had. "Mom," she panted between contractions, "I'm scared." I squeezed back. "So was I the night I had you. But you were worth every ounce of fear. And so will she be." Tears streamed down her face, mingling with sweat. "I don't deserve you." "Shuh," I whispered, focusing on the road. "All that matters is the future now." Have you ever felt the past collide with the future in one breathless moment? That's what this drive was, fear and hope battling for space in the same car. Hours later, under the harsh hospital lights, I heard it, the first cry. Thin, high, miraculous. "Congratulations," the nurse said softly, placing a tiny bundle in Marissa's arms. "A girl. My granddaughter." Marissa looked down at her daughter with awe and terror all mixed together. "She's so small." I leaned close, brushing the baby's cheek with my finger. "Small, yes, but strong. Just like the women who came before her." Marissa whispered, "Her name is Serenity." The name wrapped around my heart like a prayer answered. Those first days at home were exhausting and beautiful. Serenity's cries filled the house, but so did laughter and lullabies. Marissa stumbled through late-night feedings, but each time she looked at her baby, her eyes softened in a way I hadn't seen in years. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the window, she turned to me. "Mom, I don't know if I'll ever fully make up for what I did. But I want Serenity to grow up knowing respect, love, and honesty. No secrets. No manipulation." I touched her shoulder gently. "Then you've already started making it up. Because you're choosing differently for her." Meanwhile, home and dignity was blooming. Word spread fast. Within months, our first house was full. Women who had been tossed aside by children or spouses now shared meals, tended gardens, and rebuilt lives together. We received letters from across the county. A grandmother evicted by her own son, asking for a place to stay. A widow whose daughter drained her savings. A woman abandoned after decades of caregiving. I couldn't house them all, but I could try. With Leon's investments, I purchased a second property. This one bigger, with space for 15 beds. The day we cut the ribbon, Marissa stood beside me holding Serenity. The women applauded, their faces glowing with hope. "Welcome home," I told them, my voice thick with emotion. "Here, dignity is not negotiable." Late one evening, after Serenity finally fell asleep, Marissa sat across from me at the kitchen table. She looked tired, but there was a new steadiness in her eyes. "Mom, have you forgiven me yet?" she asked softly. I studied her carefully. For months, I had carried the weight of betrayal. But now I saw the woman she had become, honest, humbled, willing to fight for her daughter's future. "Yes," I said finally. "I forgive you. Not because I forgot, but because you've shown me you've changed." Her tears spilled over. "Thank you." We sat in silence, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator and Serenity's soft breathing down the hall. It wasn't perfect. It would never erase the past. But it was real, and it was enough. As for Calvin, he was gone. After his sentencing, he disappeared to another city. We heard rumors, a new job, a new life, but none of it mattered. For the first time, I didn't look over my shoulder. I didn't flinch at shadows. The storm had passed. Months later, Judge Morales paid us a visit at home and dignity. His hair was grayer now, but his smile was warm. "Mrs. Carter," he said, shaking my hand. I heard about your foundation. The Retired Judges Association wants to recognize you for your work. I blinked back tears. That's not necessary. Yes, it is, he said firmly. You've turned pain into purpose. That's justice, too, the kind that goes beyond the courtroom. The women gathered around, beaming, and for a moment I felt Leon's presence, strong and proud. One afternoon, as Marissa and I rocked Serenity in the garden, she let out her first giggle, a bubbling, musical sound that filled the air like sunlight. We froze, then laughed ourselves, tears in our eyes. Do you hear that, Mom? Marissa whispered. She's happy. I kissed Serenity's tiny forehead. Yes, baby. She is. And so am I. Sometimes healing doesn't come in courtrooms or letters. Sometimes it comes in the laughter of a child. And that sound can heal generations. But even as joy filled our home, I knew life wasn't done testing us. One evening, as I sorted through mail, I found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single line in handwriting I recognized instantly. Did you really think it was over? The envelope shook in my hands. Did you really think it was over? The handwriting was unmistakable, Calvin's. For months, I had lived with peace. Serenity's giggles filling the house, Marissa rebuilding her life, the foundation blossoming. But peace is fragile, and old shadows have a way of clawing back when you least expect them. I didn't tell Marissa right away. She was nursing Serenity, humming softly, her face lit by a kind of joy I hadn't seen in years. I couldn't steal that moment. Instead, I slipped the letter into Leon's old folder, where his will and his words lived. Not to hurt, but to teach. But that night, as I lay in bed, I kept hearing Calvin's voice. His threats. His rage. The way he had always believed he held the power. And I knew, if he had reached out again, he wasn't finished. What would you do if the man who haunted your life tried to crawl back from the shadows? Would you run, or would you finally end it once and for all? It happened 2 weeks later. I was leaving home in dignity after a board meeting when a figure stepped out from behind a parked car. Calvin. His hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, but his eyes still burned with that same fire. You ruined my life, he hissed. My job, my marriage, my future. I steadied my breath. You ruined your own life, Calvin. With your lies. With your cruelty. He stepped closer, his fists clenching. You think you've won? You think opening some charity makes you better than me? You stole everything from me. I didn't back away. No, I took back what you tried to steal. There's a difference. For a moment, the street was silent except for the distant hum of traffic. Then I raised my phone, the record button glowing red. You've already been warned. You so much as threaten me again, and this recording will put you behind bars for good. His jaw tightened. He wanted to lunge, to scream, but he froze, because he knew this time I wasn't afraid. You'll regret this, he muttered. No, I said firmly. The only regret here is yours. Because you lost a wife who wanted to love you, a child who could have adored you, and a life you threw away with your own hands. And I won't let you take another ounce of peace from us. What I didn't realize was that Marissa had followed me. Calvin, her voice rang out, clear and steady. It's over. He turned, eyes wide. Marissa, please. No, she interrupted. You don't get to beg now. You used me. You turned me against my own mother. You almost cost me everything. And I let you because I was blind. But I see you now. And I don't ever want Serenity near you. Her words were knives of truth. Calvin flinched as though struck. Marissa, she's my child. No, she said, her arms tightening around the baby carrier at her side. She's our child. And she'll grow up surrounded by respect, not manipulation. Goodbye, Calvin. As if on cue, headlights swept the street. A patrol car pulled up, officers stepping out. Mr. Foster, one called. You're in violation of your protective order. Calvin's eyes darted wildly. This isn't fair, he shouted as they cuffed his wrists. She turned you against me. All of you. But no one listened anymore. His words fell into the night like broken glass, sharp but powerless. They placed him in the back of the car. The door slammed. And just like that, the storm ended. Back inside, I sank into my chair, exhausted but steady. Mom, Marissa whispered, setting Serenity in her crib. How did you stay so calm out there? I smiled faintly. Because I finally understood. Power isn't in threats or fear. It's in knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone take that away. Marissa's eyes filled with tears. I want Serenity to learn that from you. She already is, I said, glancing at the baby's peaceful face. Every laugh, every breath, she's proof that love outlives cruelty. Months passed. Calvin disappeared into the system, probation, mandatory counseling, distance. We no longer looked over our shoulders. And home and dignity grew. A third house opened, then a fourth. Women who arrived broken left standing taller, with keys to new apartments, jobs, and hope. One day, as we hosted a community dinner, Mrs. Lawson, one of our first residents, took my hand. "You saved me, Evelyn. You saved us all." I shook my head. "No, we saved each other." That winter, Judge Morales invited me to a ceremony. The Retired Judges Association was honoring me for my work. As I stood at the podium, the weight of years pressed behind me, betrayal, fear, nights of tears. But in front of me were faces shining with hope. Marissa, holding Serenity. Women from the foundation. Friends, neighbors. "My story isn't unique," I said. "Too many of us are discarded by the very people we raised. But pain can be planted and turned into purpose. Dignity isn't a gift, it's a birthright. And we're here to make sure no one forgets that again." Applause filled the hall. Back home, I tended Leon's violets. Their petals bloomed brighter than ever, a symbol of resilience. Serenity toddled through the yard, chasing butterflies. Marissa laughed nearby, her eyes full of the light I thought I'd lost forever. I sipped tea from my chipped blue mug and whispered to the wind. "We did it, Leon. We taught. We healed. And we survived." I'd gone from being a discarded widow to the founder of a movement. From a mother betrayed to a grandmother redeemed. And I had learned the most important lesson of all. It is never too late to reclaim your story. If you've ever felt invisible, betrayed, or discarded, hear me. You are not powerless. You are stronger than you think. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand up and say, "Enough." That night, Serenity crawled into my lap, giggling as she tugged at my necklace. "Grandma," she babbled, her first attempt at the word. Tears filled my eyes. "Yes, baby. Grandma." And in that single word, I found every answer I'd been searching for. The storm had ended. The house was still standing. And so was I.